Phono Textual, a novel by the poet. Speaking bodies at one trace a second linkage between King and Anyagu at Gulagu. Furthermore, the custom of sending young men to the palace as pages was relatively heavy and specific, demands in taxes, not just casual. He clearly a layman and hence was, with a special seat in the outer vestibule, was the first layman to be offered the book or the cross to kiss. Pattern was expressed in many stratification in the local community. The main type, tenant, the panopticonical in our temporal, more and more chemical, combine harvesters, and small families, superpositional balance, trickle of rivers of intellectual properties, of the minerals emotional in our phonotext alchemical. He's busy with his spirits, but will upon him. The inorganic fertilizers used in China are mainly chemical fertilizer and trace element fertilizer. There is a strong propaganda campaign for late marriage and small families. The more silica-rich types of magma found destructive plate margins of the fires within volcanoes on other planets. The mimesis of the language of the geometricity irregular to the tune of infinity, leg and hip jive, as minerals of an outside of time, as the poet crowdsources the secretarial typing of the aerial, ethereal, immaterial animal in this biome, the flesh, as silence is the phenomenological body subject. Dance of the neck, of the flame, of the interplanetary irregularity of reciprocity in the simultaneity of the eleity, the trace in our phonotextual, is a graffito impressed upon the caprice of the seat as the tattoo upon the ankle of the poet is remarked. Globalization of the metaglobalization of an always already post-modernity, electromagnetism of the correspondence of matter, dig, there is no mind. Flicker, little girl in this game of comedic materialism, is the flame in the center of the eye, in every frame, is in time, and time is not easily impressed. As the right to the Prime Minister is assembled black to sender, tween, advisory group, and cosmopolitan magazine of blue construction, come in over the trace of magnetic rocks, Alex Cotreau, easily impressed. The rhizonormativity theory, the next to the Vista Villa, 853, no smoking. As the Victoria with the commercial doth intersext, is of the multiversity, Mr. Speaker, in an always already relation to the real, these the new sounds of our physical field theory in the geometricity, the trade deal in Brussels, comedic materialism, hungry in this game, the Wazungu, the others, does St. Stephen Harper sign as the chimp. The worst world is a sublation of the first world in the third. Catch the blue rocks, proprioception are remarked. Raindrops, the world is. The sun shower as the easel in the savageries of the crown. The playgrounds of the Wazungu upon the rhythms of the nasal allergies of the poet. So moment to moment the drives intersext, as the sublunary five elements is remarked, comedic materials. As chapter 23 into chapter 24, so day into day into day, the Wazungu. If the pink sheets are the novel's organ, the heating, so the pink flowers. Please use north or south entrances to the building, City of Vancouver. Even vortographic, comedic materialism is always already in the round. Seagulls rake the air, the City of Vancouver. 2073. Wood, pebbles, feather, shell, rubber, etc. And oil paint. City of Vancouver. So time is sprung. The best view is from the stage. Tantric massage and sacred sexual healing, free public service for women only. City Hall closes at Southeast Healthy Trees Dante Alighieri. Pedestrians use door. Physical graffiti as the dark side is remarked. Singing around a fire, so city council in the age of botanical e-production. Humans are driven by instinct, possession of incendiary material. Up the concrete stripes, Vancouver Whitecaps reserved on June 12, 1792, so that this memorial tablet is erected as the flame impermanence of the plane of immanence of Deleuze. Outside cold, so is the Canadian, as Alden Nolan has remarked. Caught outside, my white friends. In other respects were their differences similar. In passivity, in economy, in the instinct of tradition, in unexpectedness. James Joyce, Ulysses. Safety in the Fire, October 1983, VGH. In the fire, flesh, dialectic. In the space, time, dialectic. The poet's desire, fire door, do not obstruct. X201, attention, Achtung. This is a freeze-proof drinking fountain and has delayed water action. Press button and wait. Thank you. Plants are driven by instinct, printed, iterated in time, tied as the dimension it radiates via the tracing paper of its autobiograph, digging the Taylor Abelman sense of the word autobiograph. So temporality, Zeitlichkeit, ist das ursprüngliche außer sich an und für sich selbst. An und für sich selbst. Comedic materialism. Dig. There is no space. There is no mind. Comedic materialism. As the trace wherein the materials unfold. In triads. Access ramp Small white flowers, east wing, second floor, maximum 20 kilometers per hour. Disabled persons in this city hall. 8:30 a.m. to 4:20 p.m. for civic reserved parking. Councillors number 8 at City Hall. As the orange cones conceptualize the flame of affect theory in this game, business only, all unauthorized in this biome. Objects were the next surfaces to serve as supports for montage. Primitive societies made use of hair, teeth, bones, skins, fur, and feathers to adorn shields, masks, ritual and domestic objects. Figure 87, Juan Gris. This Sunblind 1914. Oil and pasted papers, courtesy of the trustees of the Tate Gallery, London. Terms and agreements. Sprinklers, fire alarms, verifications, extinguishers, emergency lighting, heritage building, comedic materialism. A vogue for primitive African masks, cubic materialism. I am old. The failure of poetry has left me the talent in those great poems of my youth. This is the poem of my retirement. Officially out of the world of poetry, forever into a kind of sadness of some kind. Expired is his license to tell you the kind, as the poet looks into the time ahead, seeing nothing but the end of poetry. Phono textual, a novel in mono. Canto 11. In the city council meeting, the poet, his body odor, the poet, passes his leaves of grass to the underclass with his poetic certificate, scored 420 BC, U of T, as the fire hose is remarked water, the comedic post-infrastructural materialist sense of water, bylaw adjudication. Hello, Inspector Short. Yep. Sure. Yeah. Like, there's wires. There. That's. Hazard. As the poet reviews the scale models of the city of Vancouver, his revision volumetrically perverse. What of it? That's water, as the fire extinguisher carried to the jingle jangle of the keys of life. So the janitor is always already thrown into this chapter of City Hall. E-difference. Play. Orange and yellow play theirselves within me. Merleau-Ponty. Flesh. Perceived and perceiver. Reciprocity between human and animate alterity. Fire. Flesh of the infinite. Fire. Or writing. Meinen. Being as world is, subtracted from gestural, affective meaning, being as earth, which is immanent in speech, Merleau-Ponty. Type, the burn of world upon the endless flesh of the earth the poet traces. As the swantologist, what of it? Quo indivisible in our quotidian displacement, as comedians of the physical animal in our phono textual being together as becoming real language, dig, socio-astronomic, a-productive in the game, atmosphere fluxion, of botanically rhizonormative congress, water, any means of botanical e-production, fire, lake tide, in the type reciprocal flesh Merleau-Ponty fluctuation, in the biome trace tidal event horizon in our phonotextual, in the rhizonormativity theory comedic post-infrastructural materialism, a relation to the flesh of Jesus Christ in the age of botanical e-production, dig, there is no mind. Stop to trace the real fair vote Canada goose on the VGH lawn, padding over cut grass, eating bits of grass, daisies, weeds, approaching the poet as the poet asymptotic surrender to the curved lyric percept, affect, concept, propriocepted effect of the goose picks petals of daisy from her black webbed foot, calm in the presence. The poet does trace graphite drawing since 1889 4H. Canto 15, Jeans Pocket 12. The pink pencil crayons are produced and the coffee is poured. Beggar's banquet, her satanic houses of the holy, and the red sheets of Paloma faith, the poet does unfold and read his marks carefully. Comedic materialism. Open microphone, so the coalition in this game, full rhizomatic, the crumpled dendroscripts above the poets annotated by the poet Ulysses of Emma Biron's the removed appendix for time-traveling Joycean admirers of the poets in this game, noting the pronunciation of s in this game. The Zeppelin skips open field as Wavicles is remarked, or respiration, furniture, buildings, roads, communication, correspondence is matter, all matter correspondence, there is no mind, my creative rights, of Facebook of this biome materialism, our creative rights, writing in the Lebenswelt, crushed Coca-Cola can, 174TMV833WWG in this biome, notice, restricted area, authorized personnel only, Blue Rocks, to liberate the new Democrists. As the commercial, so the victory, when the duel by the tunnel, the red and the red that is, orange coalesce, as the yellow, if the liberal, arboreal lemur being est resorbed, it succeeds the new Democrists into their desired revision into the community, as the leaves of autumnal coloring the relation jaune, orange, rouge, cosmetic of change, maple, of the changeless, id difference coalesce as the sky in the analogical symbolization of the coalition government is overthrown, so is conservation overhead. Denegation, deconstruction of negation, of construction, of the poets, notes. Sidewalk closed ahead, graphite drawing 4H since 1889, as the poet steps out into the lower mainland, the parachute, it does fluoresce, as it is opened, so id-born the poet descends into the poetry. Yes, crossed out, no. Canto 16, Jeans Pocket 1. Blue, violet, brother Antoninus, chants, contortions in the pants, a stone's throwaway line, body subject, Merleau-Ponty, art, correspondence, production, correspondence is matter, dig, there is no mind. The relation as a disclosure of facticity, flesh as a disclosure of facticity, earth, time, radiation, world, space, particularity, the relation as things themselves, Husserl, the relation as the work of art, Heidegger, tracing stamps for goods in this life world, in intentional space, dig, pronounced as art turns, trace, lake tide, botanical life world, out of the diamond the image grows, is, in there is no space, is time, science, history, spirit, mind, the real, materialism, the trace upon this manuscript of the image of a moth on its reversed side, de confusion of the bodily trace of a leaf, and the reverse sud dividing the word just, this is you, my love, burning, burning, burning this grand book of the universe. Another moth on the reverse side, love the higher law, you too, as the manuscript is crumpled and displaced, to be reasserted in the rhizomatic novel of the poets June and July, as blue leaves are traced onto those months, as the assonance calls attention, trace a parasol beneath the self-reflexivity in violet. At least is this a gorgeous, beauteous manuscript. Comedic materialism. Beats dy, qz, qg, fs, fk, open, trace yes, trace no. I'll be closing in the poet dark brown, café oscuro, brun, foncé, yes. As action painting, the canvas allows the trace by the painter-printer of the lake tidal. What of distortion? The derivative Derridian iterations sublated in an improvisation of a new ab-syntax post-proprioceptive distribution of organic effects, tracing lake tidally a trace of lake tide, so dialectical action poetry, so praxis. As the chorus allows the trace of the printer-painter, the effector, in the collage, as the stimuli are perfected past, in, as an infinite origin beyond, out of futurity, into lake tide, in the collage its curvature, so the receptor, so the trace, in the perfection of lake tide, as the vote is counted, so the printer, unreal, of its horizon, in the momentum of recreation, so the touch as the trace of its trace in itself, of itself as action, curve in the geometrically lyric action dialectic, repetition. Cars, automobiles of all kinds, swish past the windows of the hospital. In the hospital, does the dumb machine percuss to the beat of the electronically variable, of the rhythm of the organic in our mechanical, in the low-fidelity disposition, zuwards, the infinite, the hi-fi does forsake? What of distortion in my lo-fi theory of e-production, différence, its trace in the collage, the nervous system, receptor, stimuli, effector, proprioception, reception of stimuli produced within the organism, in the biome. In the round, burning, burning, burning. World Pieces Art Auction. World Peace in the round, burning, burning, burning. Art auction. Schizoid. In the round, ducts produced or obtained by impairing, diminishing, or lightening a current gold or silver coin. Knowing. World peace. Everyone who causes the barred occurrence of an event. Recreation. Knowing that the act or omission will cause the recreation of the event, and being reckless whether the event, for the purposes of this part, willfully to have caused the recreation of an event. To tabulate the fingerprints, so has us relieve ourselves in the moon. Tracing the spiritual into quantum facticity, hip animal neurotransmission of the zymbiologinal productive species council to appear in court, productive to the turban of a curved argument imperfect, perfecting us all in the tide. What are their properties? The question marks are always pronounced s by the swantologist. Quo as the real, I am the real of its intellectual property is interpreted into the intention elaities of rhizonormative distribution of the physical materials. Dig. There is no mind. Then does the windows open and fresh air with Terry Gross or Kenneth Koch as the sunlight sow the ploys and panels and plugs and panels of desire in this biome, and wet between the toes, that's the properties designated by God of it, the status quotidian made flesh in the preparations, work of the botanical producer, a Steve Albini in this game, health care for the whites alone in Canada. It goes, so the snow, white is the depth, without saying. Of the booze on the index, in time as the police, of zymbiologinal lake tide on the side, of anima neurotrans, gender trouble, as can the déconstruit, so the material as the momentum of esprit can no be determined is infinitely obtuse, so be it. Electromagnetic, the propagation of the production of the wavicle can be remixed as a continual remix of the regeneration can be looked at as a continual regeneration and reinforcement of changing magnetic field creates radio cool of the planetary. I am field the band planetary. So the real light tide tried as the medium of the construit. And I forsake as a fantasy series for hip, smart people, even those who don't read fantasy. Detroit Free Press, Maui, Thursday, April 25th. The poet enters a Toronto public house and orders a beverage. The woman sat next to him holds out, offers to the poet a segment of citric adultery in this game. Comedic materialism, a dialectical poetics practice, anti-philosophy. Space, mind, proprioception of time into space. It's like out there, Mount Purgatory is like no space burning, burning, burning of stars of the event horizon. So, in the panopticonical, in our temporal physical, there is no space. Stuart Jones' inter-people's 5 minutes of time banter is as heckling aloud, and the highlight, pardon the licensed by U of T poets anastrophe of the night, in the poet's humble, is the host Stuart Jones. Anyway, and the still point of the turning world is, in its facticity immeasurable, burning, burning, burning. So the effectors of real change in this game of basketball must travel as sound, as temperature, and the lake tidal we trace in the lack that is in Lake Ontario, so the event has no finite proprietor of newspaper clippers. Unpull and gravitate endlessly the electric, asymptotic magic wave of the bending and yet untwizzled paperclip typo as anything might, Dionysiac e-memory has been infinitely iterable in the game. To sum up, as if, to the garrison mentality, the tidal physicality of the afterlife we intuit until the mind as space in the round, as the earth intuit until the time is admitted, time-space changing bodily time undress, as the fishnet laity in our moment as time. There is no mind. A fluctuation of dual impression full lake tidally upon the tracing paper as the swan, what of it, as the cold slow wax of the light undoes the in faith, so desire eats indiscernibles in. Am not primitive, am infinitive, am to God. In the color lake tide fluctuation, in the Ontario lake tide fluctuation, in the lake tide fluctuation, the real. Two continued into so controlled onto to substance controlled ontology. As the raven in the house of Chris Pickett, in a red sweater, as the beak is the sharp curvaceous, it im August, in the jingle-jangle morning dialectic, in the jingle-jangle ich tambourine, as the green love a drug is observed, to the plebeians and to the paraplebes, and the full-blown in this game of listening to house music on a pass-out in the house of Christ Pickett, as the green. How much of this would the editor? It's nothing new to the poet. In the reader partisanship of the gazon and the liaison, ganja rouge of the hairs, the coffee is sipped, the buds are divided, and Chris did head by plane to Montreal. The toast is hopped up, acclaimed, of the voice, so the poet, a pop culture noumenon, given to make in the nude speech to the waves of those who would be conifers in this game. There is the trace of an event, early materialism of the event, horizon in the act. As the colors are scrubbed into the pool of the chorus, and the poet's reference to John Donne is remarked in the ideality of the problematic of the chorus into the pool, the act, as the colors are scrubbed thus, the book is closed and the laptop is opened once more. Comedic materialism. The poet's solo upon the vibes of intention space. A manifestation of time in its tidal trace of the process as a real sense it in the capture, cause of the possession by the poet of the quo, in the quotidian of our living as humans, finds himself, makes sense of the insanity with other patience, so the plot can be omitted, and the poetry full enjoyed, turns out to be fine, until death makes particular the dream, the plural of moose is moose, the biggest letdown ever, punchline of goose, mouse, etc., in this game of declension of the nouns of our lives. No one should be wearing pants when it is this hot outside. I am reborn. Antonius. Assorted beads. Blue. These materials swizzle the unaccountably interest, collect, love as an event, manifest, made in Sweden, dreamcatcher as sunlight, herein streams, window lit, the increase, coffee, blue pencil lest I forget, year of the cat, these the surround as the poem, sitar. Who do you think I was, Rabindranath Tagore, in dialogue with Einstein in Trinity College, crumpled dendroscript as the poem inside out of the library, as the radio sound of sparkles shriek basic, filing the cubes HQF, GQK, HHNJ, because jammin' all the jamming by my side, so the radio as the coffee is sip, writing names and curse words using the beads, in the poetic practice of trace composition, in the psychoanalysis of the taste, phono textual of the sweat glands, in this game. Craig calls the poet Bob Marley Craig in this game. All we have of the little letter beads, fast the vowels outrun the consonants into the bracelets of comedic material around the bone of the poet's African skeleton, as the poet's hungers in this game are remarked. Stir it up, so the water breaks on the shore, so the water is ignored, so the water over the fires, as the meta-values are swizzled. What more can the poet say? There is in the names the interest collective of the metafactual actuality intention NCCQFBQPNDCMPJM Whoa, those are some letters, Andrew. The values turn over in the process of reality. Indie label of the real. It's like QXQMNMQBUGFMJ in the memory. Sunlight, so the simile, so the sat around the real materialism, comedic materialism. My love, as the jungle is written in the wind, as the bar I love Bob Ross is raised, and the barred subject behind the bar, so the question mark is pronounced s by the comedic materialist, making multiple subjective the intentionalities as infinities is traced. Every quotidian state is the afterlife. Quo inheres in the state, in the dendrofactitious shake of the dog's tail. So postal codes are domain names, as rovers, as curiosities. As wash your hands after you use, so please baptize after birth is typed upon the flesh. Wrap up whatever you are working on, grab some more coffee if you want, as wash your hands after you use. Phono textual, a novel in mono. Canto 24. As tidal swans the novel. It's Andrew, it's unimagined. Id est, unimaginal. I cannot believe it is the novel is the event. Taylor Abelman will be signing autobiographs. A novel without human characters. So, as the poet in the psych ward tunes in to the Latin in our being together as an album, could the poet, might someone one day love, would it, really in itself as, in the empty, in the lonely of a soul? Would it be to broadcast death, so the poetry, my death, in this game, as the drugs and alcohol of sex in the classical, some always barred, not so the particular combine in an in-out momentum sublatus in this biome of infinite, as the Rauschenberg, best friends in this game? And what did Tatiana when? So the blues, the little, in the classical, in the drugs, would it be broadcast? The collage as pound, so the combine, as in out expressed as in process id est, the barred subject, so the bar is the in out, as Heidegger on Van Gogh's shoes towards Zufallsnesheit, never quite finite, as changes in the weather, in the gods, in the celebs of the past materialism. So the populace, so the commons. Phono textual, a novel in mono. Thrown always already into the novel, cat line dance. Taylor Abelman will eventually be novel because novelty is gradual, especially if you're an undergraduate whose gradual novelization is itself a subscript. Or, as you say, an autobiograph. Canto 27. I'm better than Yeats, whose easy way with the ladies was unknown under the tablets. Sublunary, in our being together as writing. As writing. The center cannot hold, as writing sushi, becoming real Brahmin laity in our phono textual, every day I'm husserlin, holderlin, in our as writing, the trace of the stand-up in the slam poetry, leg and hip jive, so the sublunary in our being forgotten. Cosmic lake-tide radiation, so the holds, sets in our very shelves, tonight. Interpolation, comedic materials, as the medium is remarked. The real of time, so the thesis of interest. In the medium does he produce the poet. Thesis. Voiceover, lake tide, let light to be, she probably comedic material. Stones, iteration, impression, value, position, momentum, utterance, coin, e-coin, currency, lake time, rain. As the swantologist knows originity, as the as a referential callback, superpositional, the thesis statement is a speech coin, metapoetic, elastically numbering the supernumerary. Housing hours, these holds on the infos designated lake tidally as the real Brahmin eleity of tidal, the day, discerning tastefully, measure for measure, the rhythm does disclose as I factify the public tidal numbers, so the standard, performable, prehensile numbers, so the communist society. Electromagnetic wavicle, Canto 28. The mathematical symmetry of the fundamental equations implies a physical symmetry in nature that is clearly illustrated in the balanced Vorstellung of an electromagnetic wavicle. No time to review, only the supposition. Energy equals light, equals time, equals infinity, equals the real, impossible worlds. Friday, November 16, night, exterior, space-tide. Interior pattern poetry, day. In the thesis, a manifest originity of the real déconstruit. Can the real déconstruit please do stand up? Can the real sub-déconstruit please do stand up? Tail, lyre. As the tail to the lyre, so the zerg to the facticity. Wavicle alternately possible, suppose the barred subject in relation to tide, wavicle moments, in the wave momentum position particular, determining videographic mathemes of antiquity, as the wave tide to the infinity alternately produced wave positions, determined wavicle, So the real to the identity of the minorities in this game. The real identity of indiscernible minorities in this game. A novel without human characters. Life on Earth. Unmentionables are an interest of the poet. Mismatched socks in our textual race. A floating signifier. Darkness acts as a signifier. Pigment, a meaning maker. Darker skin. So God can keep tabs on me in this game of light. Videography. It was tougher growing up for me. The joke was that I was adopted. Everyone Vietnamese is a lighter. East Asian, Mongolian, Southeast Asian, non-specified, African, East Asian, in migration, of the miscegenation, of the remix, of the remix, of the production, of the concept of e-production, affective, artistically in practice, botanical e-production, early Canada, stealing the fire from the Aboriginals, legally, potlatch, an anti-Semitic country, early Canada, God damn it, we let Hitler get away with it. Deconstruct the infrastructure. I looked at the map for a few long minutes before I erased all the lines I'd drawn. I glanced at the clock. The poet. African, with German, blood, relatives in Scandinavia, an uncle on Lamu. The novel is alive and written by the poet. Phono textual, an album in mono. Ladybug flies onto the page. From the crotch of the jeans, the poet blows this somebody, the ladybug, into its desired continuation. Wilson and Cousins, quick plug, 033 LSX BMW dig standpipe fire department connection auto sprinkler. Authorized in this death of the subject, the sunset. Plagiarized in the dating games of the homeless elites. The biomes. Center for Hip Health and Mobility. Cooking food as the sun does set. Ray in a river in light to bed. Test this poetry. Quiz this literary material. Quiddity of the indivisible of the poet. Comedic as there is hope. Animal to the heart racing. Not know to either stay quick to the earth still or to fly a ways. A thief of girl friendship, the poet, comedic materialism, fastening down fragments of the materials. Radiant her dream, full Doridian in this biome, the lonely empress, warming self so the tulips are observed, temporary, May 4th, 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. in this biome. A scream. Trace of the sunrise, race of the surmise, in the taste of the language of sunsets. A moonbeam. full socio-astronomic the coinages of the poet, as the metafacticity is swizzled into its desired disclosure of facticity, as birds tweet and the animals have species being, an email to their relatives rhizonormative up in these schizoid pieces as the fingers control fire or in becomes a danger, so this scissors of the sexes is remarked. Comedic materialism. As the air, it cools this biome well, the sun rises down the back track of the side of the sublunary originary desire, danger electrical hazard in case of damage or emergency phone City of Vancouver 871-6200. In these dreams, please use Heather Street, Kimberley 5254H. Under cover of the trace, in the cloud, animals have email. Animals fear fire. Our buildings and grounds are smoke-free. The sun doth set. 2675 Ash Street, Fire Department access, stair 52, go, the heart. Do not enter. The poet kneels a jeans sleeve into the garden. When Humans Bleed, dedicated to the pioneer nurses of 1900-1919 BC, displaced in memory, outpatient, 920 West 10th Avenue, Commedia Dandelions, 15 minutes, idle, free city, turn, engine off, material healthy, clean and green, gray in a bit of blue rocks, materialism, comedic. This area is under video surveillance. We found it increased in size. Illegal COINTELPRO program go on camera as the UFO research field featuring Pharrell Williams and Johnny Marr of Facticity. Incendiary material, crackling fires, twigs, greenery, tweets, wherein the clouds begin to turn in the sun down into light as the rain smears black the world with holy water, shards of turquoise, heart racing, heat in neck, sweat forehead, empty pools. What of it? Question about Commedia materialism. Leon Riversmore, add to contacts 3004-2014. Keep this message at the top of your inbox. To Andrew Mbaruk, leonriversmore@gmail.com. Is track 2 you improvising while reading the Georgia Strait? Is the album in general scripted or improvised? I have to admit it cracks me up, even though I only have some idea what you're talking about 1/16th of the time. I think you're on to something, but I think you'll have to keep working on it to get it somewhere where people other than you and perhaps a few friends can make any sense of what you're doing. Leon Riversmore, DIT, DMT, leonriversmore@gmail.com, 514-622-6510. Clinton Debogorsky, genius, pure genius. Andrew Mbaruk, so Clinton Debogorsky, himself always already finding, in a thrown into the novelness correspondence, dig, there is no mind. Comedic materialism. Phono textual, a novel in mono. Phonemically swantological. So the torontological ideologies, these do not faze the poet. Comedic materialism. As drunk everywhere in this city is a place, the trace displaced of the real in the moon, it displaced in its own facticity, so Phono textual, a novel in mono. This is the continual unfolding of the trace of the romancier in the white trace in the margins of archaic philosophy, the pre-Socratic and the sophistry, as the phenomenology of the pre-Torontological swantology of the physical, dig, there is no mind, comedic materialism, as we propriocept it in the game of basketball. Suppose the field of traveling, and not the Higgs field, the white man's field, my white friends. Rain again upon the dome, comedic materialism is in the round, lyric trace of the earth. So the Hitler and the Jesus Christ were separated at birth. What of it? As the Pharaoh to the Jesus of the West, so the swantologist, the flamingo of the North, and the Canada goose might just be one, and the very tide, space tide, as the sound wavicles of reason, to the real objet petit Andra, the Wazungu, the others, my white friends. So the wage equity of the lover's discourse, in a superpositional balance as the desire of the slaves, is recalled to the Pharaoh of the crawl, of the simile, of the academy, of the interpretation of the speaker. As the Pharaoh of the slaves is the homes, is assembled monté, in the montage of archaic videography, of the sound wavicles, of the nasal allergies, of the synesthesia, as Anacaluthon is resorbed. In the sublinary of the materials, as the nabalone, a drug with weed in it, so the West Coast Health Hospital of anesthetic of dissensus is resorbed in the trace into the biome of the flesh of Merleau-Ponty. The novel is alive and being written always passive in the voice of the trace. Bad writing, good writing, drift, good fog, comedic materialism. Canto 38. The electromagnetism of the sound wavical mathemes. The diamond is a geonumerical trace of facticity. As the poet takes his pills and sips his drink, and writes his walks the plank, as the materials are participated among, as the geometricity irregular of the physicality of the trace in nature, so the novel, so the evening was so psyched, these the flesh stoked, full Geridian the tone of the trace undone, so the phase of the mix under the trees of influence, since they were 16 tons in the dialect of the materials. So the blue rocks is a trace of originary facticity. Who cares? As the verb is the noun it modifies, Descartes, the real relation of the real to the ideologeme of the phoneme of the wavicles in our phonotextual as characters of the novel displaced infinitely iterable in the game of botanical e-production. In the peace of the trace, in the delicious of the drunk materialist, and we just pretend like this never happened. Money, you could try the phasers in this game, fire and death, strength of the human condition. Rodents live in the walls of our resting places, a being to trace of our facticity together as plants, always still in the world and about to save the novel from the fire, selfish in the trace of an absence of water for the homeless elites. The death of the planet is here. Insult comedy, condescension, into chillheit as the horizon is traced as the table upon which the correspondents, the confessional poets, so the comedians in the humility of the insult comedy, the death of the planet. Stuart Hall does not think golf is a sport. Materialism is a sport, ergo golf is a sport. The skill, manipulative, dendrofactual of the poet, pseudo-religious, ancient Greco-litigious segue into Stuart Jones, and then eventual, full evental, the death of the planet, successfully ripping off audience suggestion. I know all of you and so I feel comfortable. We can do so much cocaine right now. That's my cocaine joke. I love hockey because I'm not all in the trace, honestly. So the bodies perform the trace of the subscript, the flesh, Merleau-Ponty, transcribed scripturally e-productive in the biome. The joke operates at the level evening trace. Estrange in this trace of the thighs. I just like saying it. Ploy to ensnare as the fetishist, so the compliments within the fetishism, Stuart Hall. Multitasking the poet in the efficiency of the ideologeme, in the matheme of the geometric trace, of a poetics of the material as the tools, it displays the dexterity of the poet. 28, 7, numbers in the proprioception by the Torontologist, neat. The estrange inclination of the close ploy in the games, in the fetishism of release, in the 5 minutes comedic material, the death we desire to transcend and easily do in the trace of these blue rocks. As black dudes telling racist jokes about black people to white people, my white friends, phono textual, race jokes, trace jokes. The host in the birthday party for Stuart Hall, whose birthday is an occurrence in the world, sunrise of the Stuart Hall, infinity fluctuation, infinity iteration in the game, the tales of electricity in the UFOs of insanity, safety in numbers as the animals in our mindless, in Nessheit, balance superpositional. Safety in numbers as the animals in our mindless, in Nessheit, balance superpositional. So the ordinary in the wavicle, so the originary in the wavicle, sound wavicles of slave wavicles among the along planet of the Higgs field, the white man's field, my fellow Christians, the Higgs detached from the real, in deteriority subliminal, in our phono textual, a novel in mono, our frame in the trace of utopia, the nirvana, in the burning, 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 T.S. Eliot, in our phono textual tracing, the materialism, trace, the ethics of use, of the power to create, an ethics of swantological proprioception, comedic materialism. There is no mind. Materialism, accepting the drives, giving in, and utilizing as aliens of water, tracing our facticity. The commercial drive, the Victoria drive, the commercial drive, the Victoria drive, accepting the drives, yet in the planetary space tide, as the saints, they took our envelope with swizzle sticks, went to his grounds, burn Moscow to the ground, dig, there is no mind. The simplicity of the material, so mysterious. Nigger, saving the failure, redistributing the failure of water as a concept. It voids the flame of the university. So the similes of the speaker. Phonotextual, a novel in mono. Phonotextual, a novel in mono. Botanical e-production, bisexual plants. Plants are bisexual, too. OG God, the Thyrsos, statement, trisexual glitch, asymptotic, problematic, of the AM in being, is alive already? Plants are bisexual recreation in the age of botanical e-production, e-productive alive to flesh, e-difference. Jesus Christ is iterated infinitely in the age of botanical e-production. Love. Tracing in fire the designation of water as the poetry. Eating crystalline into facticity. Momentum of position in the trisexual glitch of a plant parenthood rhizonormativity, relative in the trace of our moment about the fire, surround the silence on Chilheit in rhizonormative relation to the trace of momentum. Comedic materialism. Fan Wu. Don't forget about third terms interrupting the dialectic. Andrew Mbaruk. Don't forget earthworms and species being marks for the botanically e-productive. Like, comment, share. Phonotextual, a novel in mono. In the thesis photosynthesis in the thesis photosynthesis fluctuation, trading stamps for goods in this life world, in intentional space, as art turns with the poet in one hand and the milkshake in the other. Julian Butterfield sat on the moss, the nerd. As a dandelion walk, conspicuous bipolar bear, in our sneakers in this trace of the biome, talking dumb of the trace. Comedic material of the elasticity of the tracing foil of the water jousts of the romancier Georges in this game, as the birds full Deridian did swoop to travelling into the future, swizzling the meta-prices of thought deduction in this game. Where the sweep glitch of the pigeons in this biome, comedic to the minimum, indiscernible in this game. In the mirror of indiscernible GMC 910 HD 8876 green paint, blue jeans, green coat, brown hands. As the Aeolian of the East African, it drowns the hors d'oeuvres in a walk together outside in this biome. So the multiversity is observed to us, crowing dust into the trace of the real, sub-deconstruit, the wazungu, comedic materialism. The stars are comedic materials, the elements, the table, so the fucking establishment. The Dionysiac, mimetic lake tidal desire in the round superpositional, botanical e-production, laughter, relation to the writing, being, the Zeug, so cold, heat, pain, proprioception, the ability to know the limb's position in the game, the understanding, the poem thus far. Because in lake tide, do not compromise your hunger, the real hunger, in the biome. As the E-values as number dendrofactified E-produce, to what aimlessness, always already in lake tide as a reason, in a relation to the hungry, the chillness, the chillheit of the swantologist, a disposition towards towardsnessheit, a comedic materialist superposition disorder of the clouds, rule of balance, of dissensus. Indivisible impossibility, the void end of quotient evolution, in and the practice dialectical, practice of poetry, and hominidae, comedy, McLuhan, the other, in space, and the scene, God, and the void of impossibility. Paradoxical plenitude, utopia, void of impossibility as replenishing. In their paradoxical plenitude, utopia, nirvana. Atmosphere is phenomenal, is will, Wunsch, explique ways Brahman scientifically, in which Wunsch speaks connecting psychoanalysis via surreal schizo-Marxism and Hinduism. Différence, movement of play that produces. E-difference is the non-full, non-simple originity. It is the structure and differing origin of difference in the game. comedic, satiric, id est, intellect, and body, subtext, improvisation as a Taoist, dialectic, ideas are in plants, rhythms, affects are in language, iteration, evaluation, poetic utterance, praxis, legislation, process. Of fluid, the text, fluid, conception, reader, dialectic. The sun reads the bar, an email, partition, stars, at night, hands, 2, 5, no superposition, no improvisations, sun, void of impossibility, dendrofactification, light, soil, originary lake time, no origin, no struggle, no improvisation, no struggle. The hermeneutic of suspicion is computation, as the hermeneutic of recreation is e-transmutational species production.